That Tuesday morning started off like any other, but now, thinking back, I realize how easily I missed the signs. I woke up to my phone's gentle vibration on the nightstand, just like always. Sophia, my wife, was still sound asleep beside me, her blonde hair messily covering her face. I slipped out of bed quietly, so I wouldn't wake her, went straight to the shower, and then put on the suit I had prepped the night before. Just another day, another grind at work. I grabbed my briefcase and headed downstairs, where Liam, our driver, was already waiting by the car. He was supposed to take me to the airport for a work trip, just a quick flight to Seattle for a conference. Liam stood there, leaning casually against the driver's side door, looking overly relaxed with a smirk I didn't pay much attention to at the time. "Morning, Mr. Anderson," he said with that same smug grin. "Morning, Liam," I replied, barely acknowledging him as my mind was already on the day ahead. Meetings, presentations, clients. The usual. I wasn't one to notice the little details back then, but now, when I replay that morning in my head, everything feels different. That smirk, the way he seemed too comfortable standing outside my house, it all clicks now. Sophia had kissed me goodbye before I left, but it felt hurried, like she was trying to get it over with. I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe I should have. Things between us had been off lately, but I just blamed it on work, the long hours, the stress of deadlines. I told myself we were fine. I mean, we had a nice house, stable jobs, a life most people would envy. What could possibly be wrong? The drive to the airport was uneventful. Liam made his usual small talk about work and the trip. I responded out of politeness, but my head was elsewhere, already rehearsing my presentation for the conference. When we arrived, I grabbed my things, waved him off, and headed inside. But then, out of nowhere, the conference got canceled. Some last-minute logistical screw-up. I was frustrated at first. I had spent weeks prepping, and now it was all for nothing. But soon enough, excitement crept in. I was heading home early, and I hadn't told Sophia. I thought maybe we could have dinner, do something spontaneous to break the monotony. I called Liam to pick me up, but he didn't answer. Odd. He was usually pretty reliable. Still, I figured he was busy with some errand and didn't think much of it. I grabbed a cab instead and headed home, feeling excited about the surprise. Maybe this could be the start of something better between Sophia and me, a chance to reconnect. When I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. Liam wasn't back yet, which was strange, and Sophia's car was gone too. I frowned, but brushed it aside, assuming they were out running errands together, which wasn't completely unusual. I walked into the house. It was quiet, too quiet. "Sophia," I called out. Nothing. I checked my phone, expecting a text or a missed call, but there was nothing. That's when the uneasy thought crossed my mind. Maybe Liam didn't answer because he was with her. I laughed it off. That's ridiculous, right? Liam was just a driver. He was there to make our lives easier, nothing more. I decided to wait, thinking they'd be back any minute. But as the minutes dragged on, the silence in the house felt heavier. I couldn't sit still, so I stepped outside for some air. That's when I heard it, a faint rumbling noise. It was a car engine idling, coming from around the corner near the side street. Something about it gnawed at me, so I walked over to check it out. As I rounded the corner, I saw my car parked in a small alley behind the house. The SUV was rocking slightly. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I thought something was wrong with the vehicle, maybe a mechanical issue. As I got closer to the car, the awful truth slammed into me like a freight train. Through the tinted windows, I could see two figures entwined, their bodies moving in a way that was painfully familiar. My heart stopped, and my stomach twisted into knots. I froze, rooted to the spot, struggling to believe what my eyes were showing me. It was Sophia, my wife, tangled up with Liam, the man I had trusted to drive me to work, in the back seat of my own car. My car. They were having sex right there in front of me, and my world collapsed in an instant. I don't know how long I stood there, watching my life disintegrate before my eyes, but it felt like time had stopped. My chest tightened with an overwhelming mix of rage, disbelief, and hurt. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind, so trusting? The thought of it was unbearable. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed toward the car, my footsteps heavy with anger. The closer I got, the more my blood boiled. By the time I reached the door, I was seething, my hands shaking with fury. Without a second thought, I yanked the door open. Sophia let out a scream, and Liam's head snapped up, his face as pale as a ghost, eyes wide with panic. They both fumbled to cover themselves, but it didn't matter. I'd seen everything. I had caught them in the act. "What the hell is this?" I roared, my voice trembling with fury. I grabbed Liam by the arm and yanked him out of the car, sending him stumbling to the ground. He looked disoriented, raising his hands as if to defend himself, his face full of fear. "Jack, wait," he tried to stammer, but I wasn't having it. The anger surged through me, and I shoved him hard, barely holding back the urge to do more. He fell backward, and I stood over him, my chest heaving, trying to control the tidal wave of emotions that was crashing over me. Then I heard Sophia's voice cut through the chaos. "Jack, stop. Please," she cried, her voice frantic, shaking with desperation. "It's not what you think." But I was far past caring. This wasn't just about catching them here and now. It was about every lie, every deceit, everything I had ignored because I trusted her. And now, all of that trust was shattered right in front of me. I clenched my fists, my whole body tense, but something inside told me this wasn't worth it. They weren't worth it. I stepped back, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. Sweat dripped down my forehead as I wiped it away, taking deep breaths. Sophia, still shaking, crawled out of the car toward me, her face tear-streaked and full of regret. "Jack, please. I'm sorry. We can fix this," she pleaded, her voice cracking. It didn't mean anything. I looked down at her, disgust rising in my chest. "Fix this? You think we can fix this?" My voice was cold, barely controlled. "You've destroyed everything, Sophia. You destroyed us." She reached for me, but I stepped back, unable to stand the sight of her. I couldn't even look at her without feeling sick to my core. Without another word, I turned on my heel and walked back toward the house, slamming the door behind me to shut her out. Her voice, her lies, everything. I just wanted to get away from it all. I grabbed my suitcase and began throwing clothes into it, not caring where I was going, just knowing I needed to leave. The life I thought I had, the marriage I believed in, it was all a lie. There was nothing left for me here. I could still hear Sophia outside, crying, begging me to come back, to talk, to forgive her. But I was done. There was nothing left to say. With my bag packed, I walked out of the house without a second glance. Sophia tried to stop me one last time, reaching out, but I brushed her off, barely even looking at her. "It's over, Sophia," I said, my voice flat, emotionless. "Don't ever try to contact me again." She collapsed onto the driveway, sobbing, but I kept walking. I called for a cab and waited in silence until it arrived, blocking out her tears, her pathetic attempts to manipulate me with her guilt. As the cab pulled up, I climbed inside and gave the driver the address of a hotel far from this mess. I needed distance from her, from this betrayal, from everything I had thought was my life. As the cab drove away, I glanced back one last time at the house. Sophia was still there, crumpled on the ground, a hollow shell of the woman I once loved. And in that moment, I felt nothing. No pity, no sadness. Just an empty void where my love for her used to be. This was the end of us, and I was okay with that. A year has passed since that day. I've replayed it in my mind more times than I can count. How catching Sophia and Liam in my car destroyed everything I thought I knew. In some ways, it feels like it happened a lifetime ago. After the divorce, I left that house behind and started over. I buried myself in work, where deadlines and projects became my only focus. Work doesn't betray you or feed you lies. It gave me the control I desperately needed after everything fell apart. Sophia tried to reach out a few times after the divorce was finalized, emails, voicemails, but I ignored every single one of them. There was nothing left to say. I made it crystal clear when I walked out of that house that I was done with Sophia. I didn't want anything to do with her, ever again. So, one evening, as I sat in my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom in the city, I was finally starting to feel some peace. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine. It was quiet, and for once that quiet felt good. I had a cold beer in hand. The TV was on, though I wasn't really watching it. My mind was wandering again, as it often did, back to that day. The anger, the betrayal. It wasn't just that Sophia had cheated. It was who she'd cheated with. Liam had been around for years. I had trusted him, trusted both of them. My phone buzzed, breaking me out of that spiral. It was a text from Sophia. My stomach churned with frustration. How many times had I told her to leave me alone? I was trying to move on, or at least I thought I was. My first instinct was to delete the message without even reading it, but something in me hesitated. The message read, "We need to talk. It's important. Please." I stared at the screen for a long time, debating whether to even respond. What could she possibly want now? We were done. Our lives were on separate tracks, with a clear line drawn between us. There was nothing left to say. But despite myself, curiosity got the better of me. I typed a quick reply. "What do you want?" Her response came faster than I expected. "Can we meet? I'll explain everything in person." I wasn't about to fall for that. I'd made it perfectly clear I had no interest in meeting her. I typed back, "Just say whatever you need to say." There was a pause, longer this time. I could picture her on the other end, probably typing and deleting her response, struggling with how to say whatever it was she wanted from me. Then finally, the next message came through. "It's about the child." I sat up straight, my heart skipping a beat. "What child?" I quickly typed back, my fingers moving faster than my brain. "Our child, Jack. I'm pregnant. I had the baby a few months ago. We need to talk." My blood turned to ice. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Sophia had a baby? And she was trying to tell me it was mine? That couldn't be possible. We hadn't been together in over a year. And even before that, things between us were a mess. There was no way this baby was mine. I called her, barely containing the anger in my voice. "Sophia, what the hell are you talking about?" I demanded the second she picked up. "Jack, please," she said, her voice shaky. "I'm serious. I had a baby, and I believe it's yours. I didn't know how to tell you before, but I can't keep this from you anymore. We need to talk." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You got to be kidding me. You're saying you had a baby after we split up, and now you expect me to believe it's mine? After everything you did?" "I know it sounds crazy, but it's the truth," she pleaded. "Please, Jack, can we meet and talk about this? I wouldn't be telling you if I didn't think it was important." I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the room. I could hear the desperation in her voice, but I wasn't about to get sucked into another one of her games. "You really expect me to take your word for it? After you cheated on me with Liam?" "Jack, please," she begged. "I'm telling you the truth. I didn't mean for things to happen the way they did, but this baby, it could be yours. How the hell do you even know?" I shot back. "You were with him, God knows how many times. How can you be sure who the father is?" There was silence on the other end. I could hear her trying to compose herself, but I could also hear the sound of her crying. I just know," she whispered. "I haven't been with anyone else since we split. Please, Jack. I'm struggling. This baby needs your help. I need your help." My hands shook with anger, but it wasn't just anger anymore. It was confusion, doubt. Could this be real? Could there be any truth to what she was saying? Finally, I let out a sharp breath. "Fine," I said, my voice hard. "You want to talk? Let's meet. But don't expect me to believe a single word until I see proof." We agreed to meet the next day at a small cafe downtown. It was one of the places we used to go to when things were normal, before the lies, before everything fell apart. I showed up early, my mind spinning with questions. What was her angle? Did she really think I would fall for this? Or was she truly desperate? I sat at a corner table, my hands clenched in a fist under the table, trying to keep myself calm. This was just another manipulation, another ploy to drag me back into her mess. Then I saw her. She walked in, holding a small bundle in her arms, a baby, wrapped in a blue blanket. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I couldn't move. She looked different, worn out, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She was nothing like the woman I used to know. Sophia approached the table, her eyes heavy with emotion. She gently lowered herself into the chair across from me, the baby cradled in her arms. I stared at the bundle, my chest tightening, my mind spinning. "Jack," she started, her voice soft, "this is our son." I looked at the baby, at her, and everything inside me felt like it was unraveling. This wasn't the Sophia I remembered. She spotted me in the cafe and made her way over, sitting across from me without saying a word. She cradled the baby in her arms, and I noticed he was asleep, oblivious to the tension hanging thick between us. I looked at her, then at the baby, and couldn't help but feel a surge of disbelief. "You actually brought him," I said flatly, not bothering to hide my skepticism. "His name is Benjamin," she whispered, glancing down at the baby. "He's 4 months old." I stared at the small bundle, my thoughts spinning out of control. Could this really be happening? Could this baby actually be mine? "You expect me to believe this is my child?" I asked, my voice hard and cold. "After everything that's happened?" Sophia's eyes met mine, filled with a mix of regret and desperation. "I know it's hard to believe, but I swear, Jack, I haven't been with anyone else since we split. I made mistakes, I know, but this is different." I shook my head, still unable to process it. "So, what do you want from me? Why now? Why are you telling me this after all this time?" Tears welled up in her eyes as her voice broke. "Because I need help. I'm struggling, Jack. I thought I could handle this on my own, but it's too hard. Benjamin needs his father." I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, not ready to be swayed. "And you're sure he's mine?" She nodded, tears spilling over. "I wouldn't have come to you if I wasn't sure. I know he's yours." I sat there for a moment, torn between disbelief and the small, nagging possibility that she might be telling the truth. I didn't trust her, not after everything that had happened, but if she was right, if this baby really was mine, I couldn't just walk away. "We'll do a DNA test," I said firmly. "If he's mine, I'll step up. But I'm not taking your word for it, Sophia. Not after everything." She nodded, wiping away her tears. "I understand. I'll do whatever you need. I just want what's best for Benjamin." The next few days felt like a blur. We arranged for the DNA test, and suddenly I found myself in this strange limbo, waiting for the results that could change everything. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was still angry, furious, even about what she'd done. But another part of me couldn't shake the thought that this baby might actually be mine. Every time I tried to focus on work, Benjamin's face would creep into my thoughts, and I couldn't help but wonder what if. Then, a few days later, the call came. The results were in. I picked up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest as I braced for the news. "It's negative," the voice on the other end said plainly. I blinked, the words not sinking in right away. "What?" "The DNA test is negative. The baby isn't yours." Relief rushed through me, but it was quickly followed by a wave of white-hot anger. She had lied. Again. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling with fury. How could she do this to me? How could she put me through this, knowing the baby wasn't mine? I immediately called her, barely able to control the rage in my voice. "Sophia, what the hell is wrong with you? The baby isn't mine. You lied to me." Again. There was silence on the other end before she broke down, her voice shaking with sobs. "Jack, please, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought." "You thought what?" I snapped, cutting her off. "That you could drag me back into your mess? That you could manipulate me into taking care of a child that isn't mine?" "I didn't mean to. I don't care what you meant." I interrupted, my voice rising with every word. "You've done enough damage. You lied, you cheated, and now you try to pawn off someone else's kid on me? What kind of person does that?" She was crying harder now, and for a brief second I almost felt bad. Almost. But the rage inside me burned too strong. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate manipulation. She had tried to tie me down with a lie, hoping I'd feel trapped enough to step in. And for what? Sympathy? Money? "Jack, please," she choked out between sobs. I didn't know what else to do. "I'm all alone. Liam left me, and I have no one. I thought maybe you want to help." "Help?" I spat, gripping the phone so tightly I thought it might break. "After everything you did to me, you want me to clean up your mess? After you betrayed me?" "I'm sorry," she whimpered, her voice cracking under the weight of her desperation. "I'm sorry for everything, but I didn't know it would turn out like this. I didn't know I'd end up with nothing." Her words felt distant, like they were coming from miles away. They didn't reach me. They couldn't. I wasn't going to let her suck me back into her world of lies and manipulations. Not again. I'm done with you, Sophia, I said coldly, my voice hollow. You're not my responsibility anymore. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. Don't ever contact me again. Before she could respond, I hung up. My hands were still shaking, my mind spinning as I tried to wrap my head around the fact that she had tried to trap me, again, with a baby that wasn't even mine. I was done. Truly done. There was no going back after this. For a moment, I had almost let myself believe her. Almost let her pull me back into her twisted web of manipulation. But now, with the DNA results in hand, I had the proof I needed. It was over. I sank down onto the couch, running my hands over my face, feeling the weight of everything. This entire situation had drained me, left me feeling emotionally spent. But at least now, I had closure. The baby wasn't mine. I didn't have to deal with Sophia's lies anymore. I could finally move on, or so I thought. 2 days went by without a word from her. I assumed she'd finally gotten the message, that after the test results came back negative, she would leave me alone. Maybe I was free of her for good. But on the third night, there was a knock at my door. It was late past 10 p.m., and I wasn't expecting anyone. Instinctively, I approached the door cautiously, peeking through the peephole. And there she was, Sophia, standing on my doorstep, cradling the baby in her arms again. My stomach twisted in a mix of anger and dread. What was she doing here? I thought I had made myself clear. I yanked the door open, my expression hard. What the hell do you want, Sophia? I demanded, my voice sharp and unforgiving. She looked up at me, her face pale, streaked with tears. Jack, please, she started, her voice trembling. I need you to help me. I clenched my fist, trying to keep the rising anger in check. I told you I'm done. That baby isn't mine. There's nothing more to talk about. She shook her head, her voice breaking. I know, but I don't have anywhere else to go. I don't have anyone. Liam's gone. My family won't help me. I'm at the end of my rope, Jack. I don't know what to do. For a brief second, I felt a flicker of sympathy, but it was quickly snuffed out by the memory of everything she had done. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. That's not my problem, I said coldly. You made your choices, Sophia. You cheated. You lied. Now you have to deal with the consequences. She bit her lip, fresh tears pooling in her eyes. Jack, please. Just for the baby's sake. He's innocent in all of this. He didn't ask for any of this. I glanced down at the baby. Benjamin, she had called him. He was asleep, blissfully unaware of the chaos swirling around him. For a moment, a pang of guilt, or maybe pity, crept into my chest. But I pushed it aside. This wasn't my responsibility. I'm not getting involved, I said firmly. That's final. Sophia's face crumpled, and before I could react, she took a step forward and placed the baby carrier on the ground right in front of me. I can't do this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I can't take care of him. I'm leaving him with you. My heart stopped. What? Before I could process what was happening, she turned and bolted down the steps, running toward a waiting car. I shouted after her, but it was too late. The car sped off, leaving me standing there, dumbfounded, with a baby on my doorstep. I stood frozen, staring down at the baby, my mind reeling. I couldn't believe what had just happened. Sophia had just abandoned her child, left him here like it was nothing. I looked down at Benjamin, who was still asleep, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding around him. What the hell was I supposed to do now? I bent down and picked up the baby carrier, bringing it inside. I set it on the kitchen table, my thoughts still spinning in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. She couldn't just abandon her baby and run off. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, I did my best to explain the situation, though my voice trembled with shock and disbelief. My ex-wife just abandoned her baby on my doorstep, I said, trying to sound calm. It's not my child. I need help. The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way, and within minutes, the police arrived at my door. I let them in, still in shock, barely able to comprehend what had just taken place. One of the officers, a woman with kind eyes, immediately went over to check on the baby, while the other began asking me questions. "So, you're saying this isn't your child?" the officer asked, scribbling notes in his pad. I shook my head, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "No, we did a DNA test. It came back negative. This isn't my kid. My ex-wife just showed up and left him here." "Do you know where she went?" the officer asked, his tone neutral but firm. I let out a frustrated sigh. "No. She ran off, got into a car, and drove away. I don't know where she's gone." The officer nodded, continuing to jot down notes as I tried to hold myself together. I glanced over at Benjamin, still sleeping peacefully, unaware that his mother had just left him behind. The enormity of the situation started to sink in, and I felt a mix of anger and disbelief that she could do something like this, to her own child, no less. The female officer returned from checking on the baby, offering a soft smile. "The baby's fine, but we'll need to take him into custody," she said gently. "We'll file a report and try to locate the mother." I nodded, feeling numb as they carried Benjamin out of my home. I watched them leave, still unable to wrap my head around the fact that Sophia had just dumped her child on me and run. My ex-wife had lied, cheated, and manipulated me for months, and now she had crossed a line I never thought possible. As the door closed behind the officers, I stood alone in the silence of my apartment, trying to process what had just happened. Sophia had tried to trap me with a baby that wasn't mine, and when that failed, she had abandoned him, hoping, maybe, that I'd step in and fix the mess she had created. But I wasn't falling for it this time. I was done, truly done. The officer nodded as I asked about Benjamin, jotting down more notes before he answered. "Child Protective Services has him in temporary custody for now. They'll be arranging a more permanent solution soon." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. At least Benjamin was being taken care of, and CPS was handling the situation. I didn't want to get pulled any deeper into Sophia's mess than I already had been. The next 2 days felt tense, though. I tried to push everything aside and focus on moving forward with my life, but something kept nagging at me, like the story wasn't fully over. Then the call came from the police. They found Sophia holed up in a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. She was in bad shape, disheveled, exhausted, barely holding it together. After Liam bailed, it seemed she spiraled into a series of bad choices, leaving her with no money, no support, and nowhere to turn. The police had charged her with child abandonment, and she was now facing real jail time. When I heard the news, it didn't surprise me. This was the inevitable consequence of her endless lies and manipulation. Sophia had burned down everything around her, and now she was paying the price. About a week later, I got another call, this time from CPS. They wanted to update me on Benjamin's situation. I assumed they'd tell me he'd been placed with a foster family, and that would be the end of it. But what they said caught me completely off guard. "We conducted another paternity test, just to confirm," the caseworker explained over the phone. My heart pounded in my chest. "And?" I asked, barely able to breathe. "The results were negative, just as the first test showed. Benjamin is not your biological child." I let out a long sigh of relief, feeling a huge weight lift off my shoulders. But before I could fully process it, the caseworker continued. "However, given the circumstances of his abandonment, we are seeking a permanent placement for him. Since you were the last person he was left with, we wanted to offer you the opportunity to take him in." I froze. I wasn't expecting this at all. My mind raced. This baby wasn't mine. I didn't know him anything, right? But the thought of Benjamin bouncing around the foster system without a family, without anyone to care for him, it gnawed at me. "I'll need to think about it," I replied quietly, the weight of the decision pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. That evening, I sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Long shadows stretched across the street, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I could finally breathe. Sophia was gone, locked up, facing the consequences of the choices she made. I had done my part by calling the police when she abandoned Benjamin. Justice, in its own way, was being served. When the authorities caught her, there was a strange sense of satisfaction in knowing that she wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else, not from behind bars at least. For so long, She had gotten away with manipulating people, escaping the consequences of her actions. But not this time. Hearing that she was facing time behind bars felt like a small victory for me. Like I had finally won, like I was truly free of her. A few days after her arrest, the police called again to confirm the charges. "Mr. Harrison, we've apprehended your ex-wife, Sophia Harrison," the officer informed me. "She's being charged with child abandonment, and given the severity of the situation, it's likely she'll serve prison time." Hearing those words, serving time, brought a bitter smile to my face. Sophia had always managed to slip away from the consequences of her actions, but not this time. This time, she couldn't hide from the damage she had caused. But then my thoughts drifted back to Benjamin. What about the child? I asked, feeling a mix of confusion and guilt. I couldn't even call him my child anymore. Not after everything I'd learned. The officer's response was calm, but direct. "Benjamin is in the custody of Child Protective Services. They're working to find a permanent solution, whether that be through the foster system or potentially a willing guardian." A willing guardian. I hung up the phone, my mind swimming with the implications. I wasn't responsible for Benjamin. Legally, emotionally, there was no reason I should be the one to step in. And yet, the thought of him being shuffled around in the foster system, after all he had been through, made it hard to brush aside. He was innocent in all this. Just a baby caught up in the chaos of someone else's lies. I sat there for hours, turning it over in my mind. Could I really take on this responsibility? Could I be the one to give him a stable home, even if he wasn't mine? Or would that only pull me back into a world of pain and confusion I had worked so hard to escape? For the first time in a long time, I didn't know what the right choice was. It wasn't Benjamin's fault, but I knew I couldn't take responsibility for him either. The CPS officer gave a small nod, making a note on her clipboard. "The child has been placed in temporary foster care, and CPS will be handling his permanent placement." I let out a long breath of relief. It was finally over. Benjamin would be taken care of by someone who could give him the love and stability he needed, someone better suited for the task. And as for Sophia, she was out of my life for good. A week later, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the cold remnants of my morning coffee, my mind drifting. The house was quiet, almost eerily so, but that's how I preferred it now. No more drama. No more lies. No more chaos. Just peace. I found myself thinking about Benjamin more than I wanted to admit, but in the end, I knew I had made the right decision. Taking him in wasn't something I could do. As much as it hurt to admit, he wasn't my child, and he wasn't my responsibility. Sophia had tried to pull me back into her twisted world, but I hadn't let her. I stood my ground, and now I was free. Just as I began to settle into that thought, there was a knock at the door. I stood up, crossing the room to answer it. When I opened the door, a woman from CPS stood there, holding a clipboard. Her expression was neutral, but something in her eyes told me she had news. "Mr. Harrison," she said with a polite nod, "I wanted to update you on Benjamin's situation." I stepped aside and motioned for her to come in. She sat at the table and flipped through her papers. "Benjamin has been placed in a foster home," she explained. "He's doing well, all things considered, and we're working to find him a permanent family. He's in good hands." I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and something else I couldn't quite identify. Detachment, maybe? It was strange to feel so disconnected after everything that had happened, but I knew this was for the best. "And Sophia?" I asked, though I already had a pretty good idea of the answer. "She's been formally charged with child abandonment and endangerment," the CPS worker replied matter-of-factly. "She'll likely face a prison sentence." Hearing that gave me a strange sense of finality. Sophia would finally be held accountable for her actions. She couldn't run from the mess she'd made, and she wouldn't be able to manipulate anyone else, at least not for a long time. The CPS worker stood up, offering a polite smile. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Harrison. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out." I nodded and showed her to the door. Once she was gone, I leaned against the door and exhaled slowly. It was really over now. The chapter with Sophia was shut, locked, and sealed away for good. Sophia's trial came and went. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. I knew how it would turn out. She had abandoned her child, tried to manipulate me, and now she was paying the price. The verdict came back swiftly. 5 years in prison for child abandonment, neglect, and fraud. I saw the news report and felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me. Sophia had destroyed our marriage, attempted to wreck my life, and now she was the one who was locked away. There was a bitter sense of justice in that. I never heard from her again. No letters, no calls, no messages from her lawyer. She was gone from my life, and that was exactly how I wanted it. As for Benjamin, I thought about him from time to time, wondering where he ended up. But in the end, I had made my decision. He would find a family who could love him, someone who could give him the life he deserved. I wasn't that person, and I had accepted that. The seasons changed and life moved on. The house felt emptier, but it was a peaceful kind of empty. The chaos that had once consumed my life was gone. I had finally found my footing again, free from the weight of the past that had dragged me down for so long. One evening, I sat on the back porch, watching the sun set behind the trees. The sky was painted in warm hues of orange and pink, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt at peace. Sophia was gone, locked away where she couldn't hurt anyone anymore. The storm she had unleashed in my life had passed, and now I was standing on the other side, scarred but stronger. The future was mine to shape now, and this time, I wouldn't let anyone tear it apart.